Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Savannah Harinkyu if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Monday, March the 7th, and today we're talking about some reporting that we've had on our site for a little while now, for several days, especially one story about chicken sludge in North Alabama and how that is affecting the state as a whole. Now, I know that you hear that and you might click off of this video after you hear that word, but don't, because there's a lot of things here that just kind of pass that gross name that you need to know, especially in how it's affecting people across the state and how it is kind of ruining people's daily lives, Dennis. So today I am joined by our environmental reporter, Dennis Pillion. He's going to talk a little bit about this and kind of tell you why you should care. So Dennis, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this. And I think it's best to first say what exactly we're talking about with this chicken sludge. Let's get that definition out of the way, and then we will talk about why this is affecting North Alabama right now.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people, we've tried to come up with different names for it, but we really need to be kind of clear exactly what we're talking about here. A lot of people might hear this and think, we're talking about chicken litter, the waste from the actual chickens in the cages, but that's not really what this is for the most part. So what we're talking about now are kind of the residuals from chicken processing. So when you get to some of these, huge processors that actually take the chickens and, clean them and cut them and process them up into little things that we can all buy in the grocery store and the fast food restaurants, there are parts that are left over that aren't really good for anything. And a lot of times those bits, they're off. Some people have reported seeing feathers and things. Usually it's not even that. It's kind of just this sludge or slime that's left over that can't be used for anything. And a lot of times what they do, the chicken processing plants will have these kind of waste ponds here, because you can't just discharge that stuff that goes down the drain in the processing house. You can't just put it back in the sewer, right? Our sewers, our wastewater treatment systems weren't really built to handle that. So you have to kind of treat it separately. And what a lot of them do, they have these treatment ponds kind of there on the facility, on the property where the processing plant is. But there's this kind of residue that's left behind. And that's what we're talking about here. This just the leftovers of the leftovers of the leftovers from our chicken processing process,
And as you mentioned, this is kind of what's left over. And again, we're just using the word sludge because there's not a great word to come up with here. But essentially what that is what is left over after these chicken processing plants essentially kill and prepare the chicken into something, like you said, that we can eat, we can buy at the grocery store, or we can get from our fast food restaurants. So this is that leftover portion. So without getting into too much detail, you just think about the parts of a chicken or an animal that you're not going to eat. That kind of turns into this kind of goopy material that then, like you said, is not going to be washed down the drain. So what do you do with it? And what these plants have decided to do with it is to essentially put it in a pond. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And there's kind of once you get it down, our agriculture system, for better or worse, we're really good at using all of the parts of these chickens that we possibly can. We have are just regular chicken cuts. They're little bits that get processed. Some of the little bits turn into pet food. It turns into a blood meal, which is a fertilizer. There's all kinds of ways that we can try to use up, absolutely get every last little usable bit out of these chickens. But in the end, there's still something left over and still something that you have to deal with. And really the two options basically are to send it to a landfill, which is expensive. Landfills charge tipping fees. And those, when you process as many birds as some of these places do, that can be a major expense, sending all that stuff to a landfill. Or you can try to use it as a fertilizer. And so the problem, and it can be, I've told people, swear up and down, that it can be a good fertilizer. Obviously, it's hard to know exactly what you're getting. It's this stuff from a chicken processing plant. Maybe it has what you need for a fertilizer, maybe it doesn't. But now, what a lot of companies, what a lot of farmers are doing, are accepting this material as a fertilizer, and that can save the chicken processors money. That can, if it works, it can save the farmers money because they are getting free fertilizers, or in some cases, the farmers are getting paid to take the stuff. Maybe if the chicken plant could spend $40 a ton to send it to a landfill, maybe they can pay the farmer $5 a ton, and that saves them money, and the farmer makes a little bit of money. But I think that also is leading to some abuses, because some landowners, especially landowners who don't actually live on their properties, are saying, wait a minute, I can get paid to let this company come and spread this stuff on my land. I'm not really using the land for much. Maybe I am. Maybe, I have cattle grazing there. Maybe I'm just growing grass because, I don't want erosion. But they will pay me to come and spread this stuff on my land. Why not? That's leading to situations where a lot of the people who complain about this, they're saying that people are taking this stuff and putting it on their land just to get paid. They're not really using it as fertilizer. It's not, if they didn't have this stuff, they wouldn't be going out to a feed store and buying fertilizer. This is just, and basically they are alleging that, people are just using their land as a dumping ground and getting paid for it.
Well, and there's kind of two problems here. It's the fertilizer that you just mentioned, and we'll talk about in a minute. But right now, we look at, again, that sludge, when it leaves that plant, before it even gets made into fertilizer, there's a middle ground, and that is these holding ponds. Now, I know that you mentioned one specifically in a story that you wrote, I believe, late last week, and this is in North Alabama. It's an old Hidden Valley dairy farm, and they have these retention ponds, essentially, that the people or the manufacturer that is, again, getting rid of this chicken sludge puts it in those ponds essentially to hold until it is made into fertilizer. So fertilizer is one problem that we'll talk about in a minute, but these holding ponds are causing a problem that, we haven't done as much reporting on in the past as you have in the fertilizer. So these ponds essentially are just sitting kind of tanks, we'll say, for a better word, sitting holes that are filled with this chicken sludge and other biosolids, essentially. So what is the problem? What are neighbors who live around these properties saying about these ponds, like the ones at the old Hidden Valley farm in North Alabama?
Yeah, the Hidden Valley farm is definitely a different kind of a situation from what we've been seeing up to now. I guess ADEM first it's just the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. They first set up a set of rules around this in 2019 that went into effect in 2020. And at that point, people were complaining about it, but it was mostly from where the stuff was being spread on fields, spread on land. In this case, though, the land is actually owned by this company called Denali Water Solutions. They are the ones who are taking the stuff in from the poultry processing plants, and then they're using their trucks to send it out to many, many different counties across the state. They're an Arkansas-based company. They're not based here, so they do this kind of business over at least a lot of the Southeast. And what appears to be going on, I should mention Denali. I tried many, many times to interview them for this story, to talk to them about what's actually going on. They did not want to talk to me. I haven't heard from them exactly what is going on at this Hidden Valley farm. But based on what the neighbors are saying, based on the pictures that they send, it appears that this old dairy farm is just kind of a holding area. So the neighbors say they will see tanker trucks come in. They say all hours of the night, and there are some trucks that come in and they deposit material, the sludge, into these holding ponds. And then there are other trucks that come in and get it from there and take it out to spread on fields kind of all over the area. And so that's different for a few reasons because if you're using it as fertilizer, I mean, in theory, at least you spread it once and maybe the smell is bad right then, but eventually it kind of dissipates unless you're just constantly spreading fertilizer, which you shouldn't be doing. So hopefully that's not what's happening. But in this situation, these holding ponds are full all the time. So just a constant source of smell and odor to the neighbors who live next to that property, which is kind of southern Morgan County, just over the Coleman County line. And they say, especially in the summertime, the smell, the stench is just horrible. They say, these are country people who, very deliberately, wanted to live out in the country and be away from everything. And, a lot of them own, dozens of acres, and they say, they feel like their property has been ruined. They can't go outside during the summer because the smell is so bad. They can't live their lives the way they want to because of what this neighboring farm is doing.
As you mentioned, a lot of these people who've moved to this area, they buy a lot of land because they want to be in the country, they want to be away from the city and the hustle and bustle, and also they want to enjoy their land, right? That's kind of the point of buying that much property, and especially away from people. They want to enjoy it, especially when the weather gets nice. Then you have these holding ponds essentially that are now being used for these biosolids, this chicken sludge, and it, like you said, it kind of ruins their quality of life and it ruins their property and the whole reason they moved out there. They're saying, look, this is not okay. This is not fair. I can't even enjoy just going outside on my property because I get hit with that stench.
Yeah, that's right. And the first person I interviewed in that story, his name is Robert Chandler. He moved up to Morgan County from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and he says, I would never, ever go back there. He has 80 acres kind of on top of a hillside. He's got some nice forested hills. He rides his ATVs around there. He built a garage and a workshop where he rebuilds old cars. And he feels like he's got a pretty great life up there, or at least he did until this business moved in next door.
And what are people up there telling you? I know you interviewed several residents of this kind of Morgan County, Coleman County region where this specific Old Hidden Valley dairy farm is being used for that chicken sludge. Again, we should note this is happening not just in North Alabama, but really across the state. This is not only a North Alabama problem. This is just a specific one you visited. So what do other residents say? Are they thinking of selling their property? Are they thinking of moving? Or have they contacted that farm and said, look, this is not acceptable?
Yes, most of them are hoping to get something done about the farm so that they don't have to move. A lot of them, they're not young people. A lot of them are from the area, multiple generations. They grew up there, 70 years ago. So they don't really want to just move because there's a new business in town. They're hoping that something can be done about this and they can get back to enjoying their homes the way they used to. And some of the concerns, it's not just it smells really bad. There are creeks in the area, there are streams and rivers in the area, and a lot of them are on well water. So they're very concerned about what is running off into the creeks from this place and into their groundwater that they drink. And there are kind of rules and regulations about that from the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, but they worry about how well and how strictly those are being enforced, and whether they're, frankly, whether they're strict enough, whether they're checking enough to make sure that nothing bad is running into their creeks and their well water.
Well, and you actually have a picture in your story that we're going to link here for people to read. There's actually a picture that one of those residents provided of essentially a jar of water that they had collected from a creek, and it does not look like water. It looks like anything but water. So that's an understandable concern there. Dennis, what is ADEM, again, the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, what are they saying about this? What is their response to this problem?
Right. So as I mentioned, ADEM, the Department of Environmental Management, they have had rules about this practice for almost 2 years now. I guess more than 2 years now. They went into effect in 2020. My, how time flies. But these were, they are now proposing the first set of revisions to those rules. They're saying, okay, we've had this program in place for 2 years. We're seeing what's worked and what hasn't. We've gotten a lot of complaints from people. We're going to try to tweak these rules to address those complaints. So they are proposing, ADEM has proposed some changes to those rules. It's going through the government process before anything like that gets implemented, which means there's going to be a public hearing about the proposed changes at ADEM headquarters in Montgomery. That's going to be at 9:30 a.m. on March 17th. Again, at ADEM headquarters in Montgomery, that's going to be the public hearing where people can go and speak in person, especially people who have been affected by this. People can also, residents, if you have been affected by this, if you can formally register comments with ADEM on their website. There's a link there in my story which you can click on, and also if your neighbor is spreading this material and it's causing you problems, then you can also lodge complaints with the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. And a lot of the residents have been kind of critical of these rules because obviously they feel like they make complaints, but then nothing ever happens. The situation doesn't get fixed. This Hidden Valley farm has been operating, the neighbors say, since November of 2020. So, a year and a half already, and, no sign of stopping. So there's certainly some frustration and some discouragement there. But one thing that ADEM does, it provides a place for people to register complaints. It kind of registers and tracks the companies that are doing this so that, at the very least, even if you can't get it stopped, you can find out what company is bringing the sludge in and spreading it, where it's coming from, and how widespread this is. There are two really large companies that are doing this on a very big scale in Alabama. Denali is one of them, and the other one is a company called Synagro, which I talk about in the story. But so we are, at the very least, kind of creating a paper trail where folks can at least get more information about what's happening, and they can register complaints with the department and kind of hope for a resolution there.
Well, and as you mentioned, this is not just, again, we're kind of specifically speaking about these holding ponds. There's a separate problem that you reported on before that is still a problem. That is the fertilizer itself. There is not only the smell of the problem, but then there's also the problem of, look, what is in that fertilizer, especially if you are using it for cattle? What are those cattle exactly eating? Could that get back into our food system? Could that get back into our water system? It's kind of a circular problem here. And one other thing I want to ask you, Dennis, this whole conversation, not just the ponds, not just the fertilizer, this whole conversation kind of leads back to something that we've heard for years. And that is that Alabama, the state, does not do a great job of protecting its residents, specifically its poor and rural residents, from environmental concerns. The state does not do a great job of making sure that, again, poor and rural residents have clean drinking water, clean grounds to live on, and to, basically survive on. You mentioned the well water again. There are a lot of people who are not connected to a city sewer system. There's just a lot of problems that Alabama's had in the past of protecting its environment. And this just seems like it goes right back into that narrative.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it in this case, it comes down to money a lot of times. I mean, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to use this stuff as fertilizer in the right conditions in limited amounts. I think a lot of these situations that we're hearing about that are really, really negatively impacting people's lives are situations where either the rules are not being followed or the rules are not, tough enough to prevent abuses. So, for example, there was a situation in Jefferson County last year where the sludge was being spread on an old coal mine. It's a reclaimed mine. There's nothing going on there, but it's just kind of a grassy hillside, and they were spraying it with sludge in theory, to try and regrow the grass just to prevent erosion. There were numerous complaints from neighbors, and then ADEM investigated and they issued a cease and desist order. They said, Denali, it was the company also that was involved in that incident. They said, you are not following these rules. You have violations. So we're ordering you to stop immediately. And then before you restart, you have to pay a fine and show that you're going to rectify these situations. So there is, I would say there have been some steps taken. There's some framework maybe being put into place. Again, it's just probably going to be a question of, can the state, can whoever stop the abuses? Because, if we talked a lot about chicken processing plants today, another group of entities that use this biosolids technique are wastewater treatment plants. Also, it's kind of the same thing processing our sewage as the waste from a chicken processing plant. Really, you still are left with these solid materials that you have to do something with. And if wastewater treatment plants, if your city sewer system, if they have a cheaper way to get rid of this stuff, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it saves you on your water bill, and maybe it doesn't hurt anybody. But clearly there are cases going on where rules are not being followed, where the rules aren't tough enough to prevent this from really negatively impacting people's lives. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's what ADEM is trying to get at with this new set of regulations. So now we'll just kind of see whether they're actually successful in doing that.
Right. Seems like a wait and see game a little bit here. And again, that public hearing you mentioned, again, it's in your story, but we will reiterate, if you want to file complaints, if you want to go to that public hearing, or if you want to share your thoughts, that is on the 17th at 9:30 a.m. at ADEM headquarters in Montgomery. That is all in Dennis's story as well. Dennis, I typically encourage people to eat their lunch on this lunch break show and listen to us and participate. But I'm really hoping nobody was doing that today. I'm hoping that you're taking a late lunch today. So Dennis, thank you so much for explaining this problem and kind of, breaking it down and showing why this is a problem for people all across the state.
Thanks. I'm going to go eat my salad now.
Yeah, I'm going to wait a little bit on that one. Dennis, thank you. Everybody watching, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.